It's Daring Dialogues. So come on in and get this conversation. Yeah. It's Daring Dialogues. So come on in and get this conversation. Yeah, yeah. It's Daring Dialogues. So come on in and get this conversation. Yeah, yeah. It's Daring Dialogues. So come on in and get this conversation. Yeah, yeah. It's Daring Dialogues. So come on in and get this conversation. Yeah, yeah. Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome, welcome, welcome to Daring Dialogues. I'm your host tonight, Shantae Charles. I hope that you have been having a great and wonderful day. Tonight is our Thinking Thursday, and I was going to be reading from White Too Long by Robert P. Jones and Black Theology and Black Power by James Cone. Um, but we're having real life. We're having some real life how white supremacy works experiences. And so we're going to talk about those things on tonight. And also how that plays into Black power in our real lives, in our community, etc. So, why are we here tonight? We're here to talk about racial microaggressions. We're here to talk about our experiences with them that we're actually currently having and the steps that we've been taking. And we're sharing this in the hopes that those who might be experiencing similar things will be getting some insight into how to deal with it in a way that brings some resolution, in a way that makes you feel empowered, even though we know that, especially here in America, we are heavily entrenched. This nation is heavily entrenched in whiteness and in the systems of white supremacy that are pretty much on autopilot. So, our current microaggressions started a couple of maybe a year back,
Officially,
something like that.
negative. The big issue started in June. There was micros before, but the June of 2020 is when it really began to get outrageous.
And that started with, we'll call her for this broadcast, so we don't give names, we'll call her Gertrude, right? So that started with Gertrude, right?
Correct.
And Gertrude was one of those people who she would be the older version of a Karen. Okay. So Gertrude kind of sees herself as like the neighborhood watch. And we know how that ends in some cases. Gertrude kind of sees herself as like the neighborhood watch, busybody, very nosy, those kinds of things. And Gertrude would post herself up in front of our home and she would stare at our home, or she would stare at my husband, Robert, while he was, doing his workouts. And she would make little snide comments, little, kind of sarcastic, condescending comments. And we had tried to ignore her to the best of our ability, but she kept going. So we basically had to we contacted our HOA and we explained to them what was happening. And what was our HOA's response to that?
There was no proof of any incidents. If we had more evidence, but they conclude that there's nothing further to do with this case per se.
All right. So, because our HOA said basically it's your word against hers, and you have no physical proof, you have no video proof, you have no audio proof, you just have your word about what is happening, we took some measures to install some security around our home. And as soon as we installed security, lo and behold, most of those behaviors stopped, didn't they?
95% reduction in toxic behaviors in and around their property.
And if I'm looking off to the side, it's because I'm trying to actually be on screen on YouTube and on IG. so, basically, that initial security measure, right, kind of stopped some of the microaggressions that were happening because this person did not want to be on camera. Fast forward to this year, and what is currently happening, we had an incident this year with a younger child. We'll call him Chad. Chad had an issue with boundaries.
Started last December.
Property boundaries. So Chad would come outside, and Chad would be, disruptive, kind of noisy in front of our home. Chad would get on his skateboard and be skateboarding in front of our property, in front of our driveway. And it was getting to the point where we were trying to figure out, why does Chad keep being directly in front of our property, right? And so it got to the place where as he was doing these things, he wound up flipping off his skateboard several times, and his skateboard kept flying into our property, literally our cars, and hitting our cars. So again, we approached the HOA about what was happening, and what was the response we got?
Just say it was impotent response.
So the impotent response led us to calling the police to file a police report. So we filed a police report. The police went over there, and talked to Chad, and, basically said, hey, you need to stay away from their property. This is considered damage to someone else's property. This is not your space, etc. So this leads us to microaggression number 3. Notice I said number 3. So this Sunday, we had just finished up a wonderful service, wonderful broadcast. Those of you who are on with us, the word was on fire, and we were excited, and we were sort of like getting ready to eat, and we were winding down and that kind of thing. And I was in my living room, and I heard some noise coming from our balcony. Now, our balcony, this particular balcony, is on the 2nd floor of our home. There's only one way to get to, well, 2 ways to get to this balcony. One is from inside our home, and the other is our balcony connects to our next door neighbor's home.
Balcony.
Our next door neighbor's balcony. Okay. So the only way you can get to our balcony is either you're in our home and you're leaving out the door to sit on the balcony, or you're going around to the neighbor's front area, coming up their steps, going all the way around their property to come to our balcony. So I hear some voices on the 2nd floor, and I'm like, what's going on? Because our neighbor was currently not there. So I walk over to my door, and it's 2 people. We're going to call them Becky and Ken. It's 2 teenagers.
Don't say Becky, I'll say Bonnie and Clyde.
Okay, we'll call them Bunny and Clyde for this. We got Chad, Bunny, Clyde, and Gertrude. Okay. So Bunny and Clyde are standing at my door, which is like a glass paned window, and we had the blinds pulled up.
Behind a tree.
It's behind a tree on the 2nd floor. So if you're looking at our property from the ground, you can't see into our home. The only way you could see in is if you're literally standing on the balcony like they were and looking into our home.
Right.
Which is what they were doing. So when I walked over there and caught them looking into our home, they acted like they were startled, as if the homeowner shouldn't be startled.
It's like, anyway, I'm gonna chime in.
They acted like they were startled, and I opened the door and I said, "Can I help you? Like, is something going on?" Because at first I did not recognize Clyde,
Mhm.
but I recognized Bonnie because she was standing sort of behind him. And then I said, "What are you all doing?" And they kind of turned around, mumbled, and scurried off. Let me tell you something. This is how people get shot. You're on somebody's second floor balcony,
Looking into their home.
looking into their home. They're not expecting to see you. Go ahead.
Well, the thing that we began to realize, there are several things that's a particular problem with this. It's a major safety issue because number one, someone could be breaking into the house to induce harm upon the residents of the house. We've seen that happen in broad daylight in other places around the country and around the world. So we can't put that past that. That's a first safety warning. Okay, the Bible says watch and pray. So these are things we have to understand. The second thing is that if they weren't trying to break in, there's also issues where people are trying to do vandalism or theft, where they want to scope out an area and advise on how they would want to engage in a certain property because of what they've seen inside. Okay, that's the second thing. The third issue we have is that people are just, well, not the third issue. The issue between all of that is that we have a state that has a law that is very specific statute about criminal trespass. You cannot go to someone's house to peek and peer inside their windows to invade their privacy. That is frowned upon in our state. There's penalties for that, and there's imprisonment for that. So when people come in who are not guests of our home or anything of that nature, or coming to inquire, maybe, the front door, ring a bell, engage the people in the appropriate means, that is considered an act of aggression.
So, that being said, we, yet again, contacted the HOA, also known historically as the White Citizens Council. Just look it up if you want to know the origin of HOAs and where they started. So we contacted our HOA, explained to them what was going on. We shared with our HOA what the Maryland statute was. We also shared with our HOA what their own bylaws tell them about people being on other people's property within this community. You know what our HOA referred us to do again? Call the police and file a police report. So when you are looking at cases like this and you're asking, why did they call the police? Why didn't they just, contact the person? Or why didn't they just go to the family, right? First of all, people are crazy these days.
Exactly.
And you don't want to try to show up at somebody's house
To
address their children about what they're doing wrong, because people are crazy these days. So we tried to go through the proper channels. We tried to do diplomacy to see maybe our HOA would do their job
and mediate,
and at least give some kind of warning or general notice to the community that, hey, this is a reminder of the bylaws. If it's not community space, etc., your child or whatever, or you as an adult should not be in other people's spaces uninvited. They didn't want to do that. They just said, well, we consulted with our board and we advise you to call the police and file a police report. So when people say or people wonder, how did things escalate to the police getting involved? This is part of that issue of why police get involved. Now, as a Black family in America, with all the stuff that is happening in this country, telling a Black family in America to just call the police and file a police report is actually not even the safest route for us. How many people have called the police and been criminalized for calling the police based on something that's actually happening to them. So yes, we were a little hesitant in calling the police. But because that was the route that the HOA told us to go, we went ahead and did that. So Monday, after we had done our due process with our community and were given those instructions, Monday we went ahead and called the police and filed a police report. I think it was what, on Wednesday or Tuesday?
Last night.
Last night, the police came back. Well, they came to us first on Monday, and we filed the report. And they explained to us about, that this was a serious thing and all of that, and that they were going to come back, finish their report, and then they were going to contact the two families that were involved. So last night, yes.
Last night, coming home, I got home late from work.
Last night, the police did come back out, and apparently they addressed the two families. And after that, when Robert came home, one of the families, the children were out there, and one of the parents of the children were posted up because we live in a cul-de-sac. And so the family had a bench blocking part of the cul-de-sac, and they were posted up outside, sitting
in front of our house, directly in front of our house.
Yeah, sitting on
the
curb or the street area.
The curb.
And they were looking directly at our home, just posted up outside, sitting down, looking at our home. And when Robert got out of the car, you tell them what you heard.
Well, what happened is they came out looking at me with a malicious look on their faces as I was in the car. I did not engage them in there, but as I got out the car, I took my time and operated in a normal fashion without any alarm. And one of the children said, "Oh, he's the one that called the police on us," and stuff like that, in a very negative tone. And then the one parent that was out there was looking like you could see the hatred in their eyes, like, how dare you sit there and act like this. So the Holy Spirit immediately gave me an unction to say, well, just give the benefit of the doubt that they are supervising their children. And that's how that's what kept me at peace. But however, we know that because of the behavioral pattern of one of these families, because one of the families I know, one I don't know, because of the behavioral patterns over the past 3 years, we've seen a culture of disrespect and condescension. So with that culture over the several years of disrespect and condescension tied into, well, the police came like an hour and a half ago, and here we are posted up out the side, which was atypical to their normal behavior, particularly the parent. We realized that there was aggression in their hearts towards our family. Okay.
And some states would actually label that as ethnic intimidation. But that's another conversation. So after that occurred, we went into our home, minded our business, continued to do what we do. And tonight.
Well, before you go to tonight, last night, even if it went aside, all the older female citizens of our block,
all the older Gertrudes,
they rode around. They were, catcalling amongst each other, very loud, very rambunctious, very beneath the station of maturity that you would expect from that age group.
So, needless to say, one thing that we were recommended to do by the responding officer was basically to get more security. So now, on top of the security we already have, we have to invest in more security. This is the cost of living in America.
In a gated community.
Yeah. And this is a mixed racial community. It is predominantly white and Jewish, which are not synonymous. But yeah, so when people tell me about crime-ridden places, I didn't have to have security cameras for my property in places
Non-gated
where
community.
it's no gates. So yeah, go ahead. So you can talk about what happened tonight. This happened literally 15 minutes before we got on tonight. So
Right.
go ahead.
So I had another late day at the office, um, and as soon as I get in and I open my door, I hear a door open from another property. So I said, okay, now someone's coming out of their house immediately as I come out of my car. So then the watch and pray mandate, the meter went from, from yellow to orange, because it's always yellow when you get home because you got to be aware. I went to orange, which is another alert of a level of alertness. And the one of the parents, not the parent who was out there posted up in that evening, yesterday evening, but
The spouse.
the other parent, the other spouse parent, came outside with their dog and asked politely if it's okay if we can talk, if he can approach and we can talk for a little bit. So I said, okay. He asked respectfully. I can see that in his body language was not aggressive, because you have to watch that. So I stood on my driveway directly in the line of sight of my camera that faces our driveway. So he began to say that he wanted to apologize. He was very, very remorseful, wanted to apologize on behalf of his children, and then gave me the information about who the other child was
That we did not ask for.
that we did not even ask for it. They just volunteered that information. So, in that respect, he was very apologetic. He was very remorseful in his tone, and literally, it became literally like a counseling session for that parent, because immediately I felt the Spirit of God come in and bring repentance into his heart, and at the same time bring encouragement to his soul that we're not against him. The Lord just began to tell me how to respect him, honor him, and say how much, wasn't untrue, him as an individual, not the other members of his family, about how there was a great respect for him and that there was a desire to have a greater relationship with him. That began to break him down. And I saw how God worked. And what happened was, they admitted that this was outside of their territory. This is our cul-de-sac, and we don't want to have any strange awkwardness, and that because we're all together as a neighborhood. So he really, really expressed that sentiment, which I agreed with, and I went to shake his hand and gave him a really encouraging, hug. The man bro hug, and God began to bring a healing. Immediately, there was a healing that came forth in this process, because we've been praying, and we commissioned other intercessors to engage into spiritual warfare against the spirit that's trying to attack our life. Because, number one, and this Shante doesn't know this yet, but one of my colleagues had a very horrible incident last night as well. Mm-hmm. And one of my closest colleagues, and I had to counsel that colleague, and God began to use the experience I went through to help encourage that colleague in a very grave situation that they dealt with in their family. So there are things that God has on our horizon that's going to be very great, very powerful, and that we are going to be able to, we're going to really move in some greatness and some things that are on the horizon, in the near horizon. So this was an adversarial thing.
And I just want to say, for the record, parents apologizing for their children is not the end of the story.
Correct.
Because his children's patterns of behavior lead to lockup.
And
So there's got to be some education. There's got to be some, your children need to apologize. There was another party, the Clyde of the Bonnie and Clyde has not admitted to the issue of criminal trespass. So this is not a closed issue. This is an issue that we are still going to be watching closely because of the fact that we have not seen real sorrow of repentance from the people who are actually doing
the
it.
perpetrators. Yes.
It's one thing for your parents to apologize for you, but your parents can't apologize for you forever. Especially when you hit that 18 mark, you're going to be responsible for your actions. So if you don't get your actions in check now, that is going to be a whole other level of issue. And we don't need any more Dylan roofs. We don't need any more Kyle Rittenhouses. We'll need none of that. And we're not going to go for it. And so our vigilance remains in terms of maintaining our boundaries, expressing what our boundaries are, and letting people know that this does not fly. What your children did was not okay. And I'm glad the parent acknowledged that what they did was not okay. But beyond that, they need to understand that you cannot go around violating people's boundaries. Mm-hmm. You got a warning this time, but just understand we will follow through if this thing happens again. Now, tell them about the conversation you had with a former officer today and what that officer said.
Yeah, the former officer in person in law enforcement gave me some counsel, which was very tied to what I had in my heart to do. But they also addressed that what you need to do is that, the cops, yes, it's criminal trespass and it's a minor fine and it's, a short time jail sentence for that. But they don't take that too seriously. And they said what happens is you want to also go into the civil aspect of it, not the criminal aspect, about discrimination, harassment, and intimidation. And those three things to go to the agencies, I don't want to name the agencies that he made reference to, but go to those agencies to help build with the evidence that you have and the information you have. And now that you do have a police report on this issue, to put it into a case where the community is not being protected. Mm-hmm. And to go to the authorities to address the entire community, not just one household or two households, address the entire community so that they can be corrected in their behavior
and held
accountable for upholding the peace, safety, and welfare of the citizens and the residents of the community. So that was very valuable information that was very much in tune with what my heart's direction was going. So that's where we are.
Because the reality is, if you are paying a monthly fee to a homeowners association, that monthly fee is not just supposed to go to, oh, let's make sure we get snow out of your driveway, or let's make sure we take care of the lawn. No, it's supposed to be for the well-being of the community.
Right.
So if you aren't doing your process, your own process in your bylaws of if something happens in the community, what is the first step? And you're only telling your Black community members to just call the police and file a police report, that means you're jumping over several steps in your own organization's bylaws, which puts you as a homeowner in a very bad position with your fellow neighbors, because that does not foster
a
healthy community.
Right. Because let me interject this, because one thing I have, like in, one previous cases where we had, people have their pets, and we had pets that not do they just defecate in our yard in the past, which we had to address that, but there was mysterious defecation happening midway up our front porch on the steps. So you literally had to have your pet go up the steps to our house. and defecate on that porch, and it happened more than one occasion. So we addressed the HOA about that, and they like, well, we ain't gonna do nothing about that. That's your business. If you deal with it, I'm under control, you know. So, but in that instant, the individual who had the pet, because the fecal matter was tied to a certain type of pet, which we knew whose pet that was, later in the day, that particular household was feverishly cleaning up the defecation all around their home. And what happened was, the only way they've known that is because they were informed by the HOA, even though the HOA said that they're not going to do anything about it. They do things to protect the violators, but not those who are victimized by those aggressions. So with that behavioral pattern, I did acknowledge that in responses to the HOA, because even though they don't respond, the key is, even though they don't respond in a favorable fashion, and even though they have very impotent responses, the mere fact that we are addressing the issues as they occur brings forward a thread of paper and liability where they cannot neglect that these issues were addressed to them and they denied to take them seriously.
Yeah. So the repeated inaction or the repeated underaction is what will be addressed in the future.
Mhm.
So, yes, while we are doing the work of ministry, while we are advocating for everyone else, this is the foolishness we got to put up with. Just thought I should share that.
Because there was a point in our lives where we dealt with the flip side. We dealt with, where God had put us in push, blessed when you were abased or when you're bound. There's a state of testing where we were abased and we were dealing with difficult situations with neighbors. And and God elevated us out of those abased situations some 10 so years ago. And now that we're in a very blessed, bountiful position, some of the similar traits are going on. So we have to understand that it's not about flesh and blood. It's about principalities and powers and spiritual wickedness in high places. Even though it is spiritual wickedness in high places, it doesn't mean you neglect to deal with the natural aspects, which is the door to that spiritual activity. That's a word.
Keep a record and address people through their own policies. Mm-hmm. And the more that they refuse to respond based on their own policies, just know that they're digging a hole for themselves. Mm-hmm. Our job is to just keep bringing it to their face, because all we're doing is we're building a case through your inaction. Mm-hmm. So, Black people in this country, I know people have a tendency to just let things slide. But at this point, if you're experiencing I know some people have experienced worse things than we have. If you're experiencing racial microaggressions, especially in your community, where you're being made to feel unsafe, where people are trying to intimidate you, any of that, you need to start keeping a record. Record when you can. If something's being said to you, record it. If you are under a HOA agreement, report it to your HOA and keep those records. Keep good records and document what is happening as it occurs.
Right. Don't wait till later on. Document it as it occurs, because you have a date stamp for the activity.
And even though it, took us a day, because we actually went through a due process.
Yeah, we addressed the HOA, we addressed our legal counsel on the appropriate means, and our legal counsel is really the one who gave us the appropriate to document the case through having the authorities involved directly. And that was something that was important, because in order for things to be effective, you got to follow the chain of command to get the documentation that's necessary to uphold your case.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've got enough evidence Based on these responses, we have enough evidence to go to the next level. And like Robert said, it's not just about us, it's about all the other Black families and people of color families in this community that also need to be protected. And if this is how you're responding to us, what about everybody else in this community?
Right.
Is this how you're handling all of us? Because in the last year or so, there has been an increase of people moving into this community and making it more brown. So are you doing the due diligence to make sure that everybody in this community is treated fairly? All of us have to pay the fees, but I shouldn't be getting subpar service or responses from you about my well-being in this community, and everybody else, you quickly jump to their assistance, or you quickly address things that have to do with them. But when it comes to us, in our personal safety, in our property, your only response is, oh, just go
We don't want to do anything.
elevate it to the highest alarm.
Go somewhere else to get yourself resolved. Don't come looking at us. That's pretty much what the tone of their conversation has been.
Yep. So if you want to come and join us tonight to respond to what we have shared, you can click on the camera. We're going to chop it up for a little bit. We've got about 20 minutes tonight. But this has been, as I said, sometimes the issues are exhausting because you don't want to be using your brain power for this.
Exactly.
I know I don't.
Exactly.
But these issues can be exhausting. And so I am bringing on Pastor Ben and also Lady Barbara, and hopefully it will pop you guys on. And good evening.
Good evening.
We'll start.
Pastor and Prophet, how are y'all? I won't ask that question.
Hold on. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. I want to make sure I say good evening. We'll start with Lady Barbara and then Pastor Ben. Pastor Ben, you're spooling for a moment here, so hopefully your video will be able to come back forward. Go ahead, Lady Barbara.
I'm just, it's not surprising, but then when you think of the thing that I'm looking at, you guys went through all the process of getting there. You had a fight along the way to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And now to try to live in peace and go and come and live your life. And you have to, it's like you got to looking over your shoulders, because when Apostle said the adults come out and post up and staring you down, you don't know what their intentions are.
Exactly.
So we have to, we don't. You don't know. And here's the other thing that I have a problem with. That is the behavior that's learned in that home. There's an okay that's been stamped on that. And then like you said too, Prophet, and you as a parent come and apologize. Where is the child? Because when back my rear growing up, if you did something disrespectful, the parent brought you to the adult.
Right.
And made you aware that was unacceptable behavior.
Right.
And to look on the second floor balcony of someone's home that you feel that comfortable overstepping their boundaries, and you looking in my house, and then if I went boom, 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 what are you doing up that high that you on the second level of my property?
Yep.
That was so shocking when you said that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the reality is they had to trespass our neighbor's property to get to ours.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 2 counts of trespassing. And our window was wide open. So they're looking all in our home. And I'm like, if we had done that same thing, if we had gone to your house, got all the way up to your second floor balcony, and stood in looking in your living space, what would your parents' response have been? Had they been walking past their living space and just saw us staring in the window looking in their house?
Man, that
Oh my.
So that's what I'm saying. Like, the
Yeah.
fact that you feel that comfortable violating someone else's boundaries and trespassing on their property, not even standing on the first floor, right? Just looking, but you have taken yourself all the way up to the second floor of someone's home, to their private deck, and you're looking in their home, and you haven't apologized yet.
And then you have the older, what they call the older ones, that they feel is necessary, so immature to do cat calls and making you alert that they're aware, you know, that you call the police. The other problem I have with what you call it, the white citizens council. I have a problem with that, because if you don't pay them HMO monthly fees, they're going to be sending you notices. But when you need assistance and telling them we're being violated and disrespected, you tell me call the police, and we're not going to even look into that.
Right. That's what I'm saying. They won't even look into it, even though in their bylaws it says explicitly what children are not supposed to be doing and where they're not supposed to be. And we submitted their bylaws to them,
right,
and the Maryland state law.
The state law. Mm-hmm.
So Apostle said you all can file a civil ethic type of civil suit saying, okay, I can't get help from my HMOs in the community where I live, pay taxes, and live as a citizen there. And you gonna tell me I'm a citizen, I live in this community, I pay taxes, I pay HMO fees for upkeep, and everything that y'all say that I have to abide by. But when I come as another color, y'all can't help me. But if it was my brown children,
right,
there would be a whole nother issue. I'm hot.
Let's be real. If it was black kids on a white parent's second floor story deck looking in their home, the whole community would be outside with picket signs. Let's be real. In front of those parents' homes.
Exactly.
So, you know, the level and the lack of response is like I said, it's building a case, because when we present it, we just gonna pull files and say this is repeated behavior. This is not the first time. This is repeated behavior.
And even with the parent, I addressed the parent that there was a culture of disrespect from these children, which led to the fact that, and I had to tell that individual, the parent, that because of the culture of disrespect, you need a third party to engage them, not yourself directly. Because what happens is when you go to engage someone directly, they can actually turn that around against you and saying that you are aggressing them. So when you have a third party come in, that you are out of the picture, and there's no situation where you could be seen as the aggressor in any situation, because there was a professional servicing agent.
And so again, I don't mind the fact that we had to file a police report. What I mind is you made us skip over the steps that you as the HOA were supposed to engage in.
Right.
Exactly. And Apostle said something that was so key. You need a third party true in that, because you know what, he can go back and go to them and say, well, I went to that family and apologized. That's not good enough. Because that's his next, what Apostle just said, they had this conversation, and I have to make you aware that that's disrespectful, crossing boundaries, could have cost somebody their lives, but he's going to turn that around and tell them I apologize to the family.
It's a hot mess. That's all I have to say at this point.
It really is. It's disturbing.
It's a hot mess.
Have to go through that.
It's a hot mess. It has disrupted my week.
I know.
And let's just even talk about having to call police to your house to report the fact that you have been trespassed.
Yeah.
And how often that does not go well when Black people have to do that. And I'm having to do this in the middle of a pandemic.
Exactly.
Which means now I have to let someone in my home because they have to look at the property and the evidence and where they entered and how they could have entered and all that. Now you are now having me to have to expose myself again in a pandemic to people who shouldn't even had to come to my house in the first place to write the report.
Well, let me back up and say one thing. This apology would have never occurred if there wasn't police involvement.
Right.
So what happens is it may appear
because the police came Monday and tonight is what?
Thursday.
Okay.
So there would have not been any engagement at all if there was no police involvement. So what happens is when you take appropriate steps for justice, you have to make sure you take those steps because people will have no way to skate around the responsibilities they have to respond to their aggression. Because when you don't say anything and when you don't do anything, that means they have nothing to respond to and everything is status quo and we can go on as this is normal behavior.
Exactly.
I see Ben over there, Pastor Ben. He ready to blow up.
Pastor Ben, bring it on in.
Pastor Ben, bring it in.
I'm gonna be nice.
Don't be nice, be real.
I'm gonna be nice. Both of you are absolutely right. Had this shoe been on the other foot, police would have been. Well, first, everybody would have been involved because number one, though, HMO, they would have handled
HOA.
it. Then the police would have, them, those folks, the white folks. Police would have been involved anyway, and those Black children would have been taken down. See, I mean, people like to say, "Oh, you're playing the race car." Like I tell them, y'all invented the game. We only playing the cards that we were dealt. So if you want to change it, change the game. So but man, this is ridiculous. And as Lady Barbara said, because I was going to speak about that. Now, if you had defended your property with a gun, see, then what?
Yep.
This is what even the parents should be looking at anyway. I mean, when you speak about the strict trespassing laws that you all have there, listen, we know in our neighborhood there would have been a beat down. Okay? Parents would have beat you down. So, not that I approve of that, but still, that's what would have happened. So, when you can just blow it off when your child is involved in something like that, all my mother would have to do was hear about it. Police wouldn't have to be involved. Okay? That would have been my butt, and I mean literally.
Yeah.
So, but it's like they just blow it off. Now, if this had been another white person place that they were going into, I believe it would have been even different.
Yeah.
But because of the color of your skin, it involved white children.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It was just blown off.
I forgot. It involved white children plus their dog.
See, that's the thing about it. That's the bottom line. Because they believe that we're white and we have the right to do anything we want to anybody. And Black people have no rights that we have to respect.
It's still the Dred Scott decision passed down. It's that mindset. You have no rights which we are bound to or obligated to respect.
And that's blatant disrespect. You know what came to me? I'm sorry, Pastor Ben, too. Now, if you went up there and been stunned, God forbid, and you just went blasted, and they had to come and get their bodies off of the balcony and body that is some, Pastor Shante, not these days that we're living in.
That's what I'm saying. Like, they're not, and of course, we just had this conversation last night. they're not thinking. They're only skating on entitlement.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, that's good.
They're not thinking. They're
skating on entitlement.
They're skating through life on entitlement.
Right.
And the fact that you wound up on our balcony and not some of these other Black families in our neighborhood's balcony, just by virtue of that, God had mercy on you.
Yes,
because I can't think of too many Black people in this neighborhood who gonna want to look out their balcony and see you standing up, posted and doing like this in their house. So am I livid? Yes. But am I also an educator who understand they're not thinking and they're skirting through life on entitlement and eventually it's going to come bite them in the butt more than likely?
Well, what I had to do.
Yeah. Go ahead.
The choices you make have consequences, regardless of that privilege. They better consider that.
What I had to do, I told a parent that I did work with juvenile detention children for about 18 years, and we see behavioral patterns that are leading towards criminal-like activity. And because of the culture and the progression of behavioral patterns, we had to make sure and protect ourselves because we know what those outcomes are from those patterns. And he was like, you know what? He like, you're right. I mean, the way to see a grown man really get emotional. I mean, you can tell when someone's being fake. And you can tell when someone is trying so.
You have to help me with that one, Apostle. Though.
Listen.
You have to help me with that.
The Holy Spirit will let you know whether someone's being sincere or whether they're being facetious.
But I want to reiterate that is the father's stance.
Right.
Yeah.
The father is
married.
The father is married to a Karen. And this is what we have to contend with, because it was a Karen that drove Kyle Rittenhouse across state lines to do what he did.
Exactly.
And it was Karens that built up the Confederate statues and all that type of stuff.
Exactly. So, we have the conversation on tape, and I get Dad, because you know me, we recording everything. You approached us wanting to have a conversation. So we had a conversation and it is recorded. But the reality is Karen was posted outside with her child looking at our house. It wasn't the dad, right?
Listen, I'm going to tell you this. Like I said, Miss Sarah and Letitia Lockett McGaugh, she would have been posting up in front of nobody's house.
Well,
she would have been trying to been drugged off the floor.
Well, see, what happens is the father recognized that his family is getting out of control, and that's going to have a financial impact and an emotional impact if he loses his children to the justice system and lose his finances and economic viability to us having to pay out a civil suit or a criminal suit.
Because here's the reality. We not playing with these kids.
No, ain't nobody got time for that.
We have it on record. And the responding officer was irate themselves. The responding officer was a white Caucasian lady. She seemed a little hood herself. And the responding officer was like, just let us know if you have any other problems and we will be happy to come and lock them up.
Because what do you trespass on one neighbor to get on the balcony of another neighbor
this is kind of blurry,
to peep into their home? What?
See that? See how blurry that is?
Listen, for me, this is obvious, okay?
Yeah.
This is obvious. This house belongs to Black folk.
So this was
we don't want in this neighborhood anyway.
So this was yesterday. This was them.
Skateboard.
This was them posted up with the parent on the end. This is looking directly at our homes.
And this person sit right here.
As you can see, they are blocking the what do you call it? The cul-de-sac, the driving circle. Okay. And this was what they were doing directly after they were addressed by the police.
Which they don't do.
So that the Karen is the mother to them. And so what happened is Ken tried to be an intercessor, but Ken can't run his household.
Well,
the household is out of control.
I wouldn't actually call him a Ken because he did step up and address the issue.
What you call him? What you call him?
I don't know. You could call him a
Well, I think, but Pastor Ben,
you could call
let
him
me say this. He should have brought the whole family with him then if he was trying to do right. Now, come on.
Listen, I agree with that too, but at the same point, he knows his family. He knows his wife is Karen. He knows what that might have led to.
Well,
because what happened is
he better get Karen under control because
that's what this was about. Because he realized my wife is out there trying to post up against a big black man. Oh my God! Oh my God! I got to do something about this because he's gonna wind up killing everybody. You know, that's going to the back of the head.
You just reminded me of a video I saw of a football game where this white woman was messing with this black guy. When the black guy stood up to correct her husband jumped up and got knocked out. Okay?
Hold that thought, Pastor Ben. Hold that thought. This has been.
we don't condone violence.
This has been another episode of Daring Dialogues, and I've been your host tonight, Shantae Charles. If you are listening by Anchor, we do have to cut off at this point, but you can always go to our IG at Daring Dialogues and catch episode 28. Episode 28 of tonight's conversation. You can find it, the continuation of this conversation, on IG. Until next time, we'll see you then. All right, you may continue.
but it was a football game, and she was screaming at him, yelling when he stood up, and she slapped him. He had like his glasses off.
Oh no!
No. He took a step. Her husband jumped up to come after him. He knocked him down. He kicked his behind. And then when security came, white people were there, and they said, "No, she started it." But she did. They backed him up. She started it. You know, So the thing is that if you, listen, be the man. Okay, when she's out of line, check her. Bottom line, check her, then you won't end up getting knocked out.
I know.
Wow.
See, don't wait till it's too late. And this man getting ready to defend himself against something that your woman shouldn't have been doing.
Yeah.
And you'd have the balls to stand up then. But as soon as he stand up, now she's put you in a position of where you actually have to.
Exactly.
And so, I look at our current issue and I think about all of the recent stuff that has happened in this nation, right? Jesus. And dealing with Black people who snapped, who just said, you know what? I'm tired. And I'm tired. Like, I think one of the shootings, was like at a, I forget what it was, like a processing center. And they were talking about how, the guy took out all these people, and they were like, well, what was going on? Because Black people don't just be snapping like that. We really don't. We are a loving people. And they were like, no, this guy they had been doing stuff to him. They had been saying stuff to him. They had been tampering with his food. They had been putting stuff where he could see it. Like, there were things that led up to that person going off.
Yeah.
We're not those people. But what we do know is that we serve a God that goes off about us.
I know he said he a vindicator. Yes, he is.
That's all I got to say about it. Because I'm just like, Abba.
Yes, Father.
You do not want me to call God into this. I'm praying.
That's what I do.
I am praying. But there's something called the imprecatory prayer.
All right now.
That's what David would pray against his enemies. You don't want me to go the imprecatory prayer route because it will be dealt with.
Yes.
Now I know this as a prophet, so I don't whip out imprecatory prayers.
Yeah.
Every time somebody get on my nerves, I don't do that.
But Lord, I don't want to be Elijah. I don't want to call down no fire, nobody.
But all I'm saying is you're knocking on the wrong door. You're knocking on the wrong door.
And don't even know it.
We have grace and we have mercy, but we also know God put us in this region and in this atmosphere to execute justice and judgment.
Exactly.
So we're very clear about our role here. We have spoken, and some things have been uprooted and come down, because that is the authority that we walk in. Now we trying to go to grace and mercy route. This is where we are. But I'm gonna be honest and say this here is time number 3.
Yeah.
That people don't want to do right. And I'm trying to live in peace. I really am.
And that is your castle. That is your castle, and you should have peace in your castle without intrusion, invasion, overstepping boundaries. That is your home, and nobody has the right to violate, to disrespect, and none of that. But sometimes people, sometimes God got to show up and show who you belong to. Because sometimes people don't recognize you all belong to the true and living God, so they don't understand. So then when God show up and show out and show them who you are, then you tremble and not know. But you know what? God is in control. Yeah. And it's amazing you shared about the HMO, because I was praying. HOA. I said, God, make them do the I get it twisted.
Yeah, HOA.
The HOA, but I was praying the other day that God would make them do right. All right, Apostle. That God would make them do right.
What?
Robert Jones. He over here cracking jokes.
He over there being funny. I see him at it. But I was really praying that God would make them do right. I even was praying for the police, because if you had to call them, that God would send ones that were dealing righteousness, because like you said, we know how that goes.
And thankfully, that's what happened in this case. You got a police officer.
And let me tell you this, because of the authority God has given us, and because of the prayers we have prayed, God has blessed us to have very, very, very positive encounters with law enforcement. So that's just an angelic command that the heavens has given to us, that when we're in need of law enforcement assistance, that we get the property. Because even in the previous occasion when we had something happen about 5 or 6 years ago, that God gave us a white male law enforcement officer who hunted down the perpetrators and called us back later. I just want to call you, let you know we got him.
Amen.
So that was blessed me, because we have to understand that there's power in this tongue, and the power we declare is that no weapon formed against us shall prosper, whether it's and that there's more that are with us than are against us, as the prophet.
Yes.
Because that's a mandate God gave me to declare years ago, and He gave me an artwork to produce in that. And because of that very art, I call it angelic allies, that God dispenses. I feel something coming up, rise up my esophagus. Chante, take it over.
So the lessons that we have learned from this is, do not let up your pressure. Put pressure on the systems of white supremacy. Put pressure on the people who are trying to operate in those systems, and people who basically want you to kind of just take what they're giving you. Put pressure on those systems. Don't let these systems get away with yet another year of doing what it is they want to do, rather than doing what it is they should do.
Yes.
And when you see it happening, whether it's in an organization or an individual, to address it when it is happening. Yes, you may have to go through some channels. Yes, you may have to think and organize and plan how you're going to respond, but make sure you do respond.
Right. Don't say, well, it'll be okay. It'll be all right. No.
One more thing, and I'm done. Well, two more things, actually.
Go ahead.
I want to give a shout out to Shatoya Falls. That's Jordan. That's another friend of mine.
Welcome.
But I want to speak about something that I experienced with them. What do you call it? HOA.
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 HOA. Yeah, HOA. All right, bro. But I went to repair a lock on a door on a Sunday. Right? Now the president of the HOA comes over, tells me that I got to stop working because it's against their bylaws for a person being there working on Sunday, right? So tell me if I don't stop working, they'll call the police.
What?
I say, call them. Yeah, I said, call them. And there's this older lady that's there, and she knew this neighbor. This particular person, this neighbor whose place I was working on. She knew that, okay, now this lady don't cause any problems. When she found out that I was repairing a lock on the door, the lock was broken, wooden lock, I was repairing the lock. She told me, she said, listen, yes, there are laws, but you have to know when to enforce them and when to be lenient with them. She said, this lady's lock is broken. That's a safety issue, right? But he wasn't here. I'm going to call. I said, call them. Call them. Let them come and see what's going on. Hey, wasn't much they were going to do because I had two white ladies backing me up. So, they would have gotten there, they would have saw that he's repairing a lock, which is a safety issue. See, it's a safety issue. If one of those buildings catch on fire, the fire department can't come in there on a Sunday. See, that's an emergency issue.
Right.
See, somebody have a heart attack. Oh, you better not bring the EMS in here because it's Sunday. That's an emergency. Even though this is not life-threatening, it could be because her security is not going because the door won't lock.
Right.
So, they get crazy sometimes.
People,
with authority
and with policy. Because you guys know I always say racism is spelled Policy. That's why we know people operate in racism through policy. That's why we put their policy right back towards them. This is what, according to your bylaws, this is what you said is not acceptable in this community. This is what you said is not allowed.
Right.
So the very fact that you're bypassing what you said to send us directly to the highest level of response is showing your negligence. And that's what, as we go forward, that's what we're going to keep pointing out. We sought their help. We sought the proper processes to use. They continue to ask us to elevate it to the highest level of response without them intervening with the basic responses.
Responsibilities of their bylaws for the community.
True. That's true.
So if you're not doing the basics, then what am I paying for?
Exactly.
And then on top of that, we're having to incur more costs because we now have to beef up our security because you won't do your basic job.
Exactly.
So that's where we are. Now, any final thoughts?
I'm just praying.
I hope this has been helpful as we've been talking through this. I know people are listening, but we're talking about, if you're just coming in, we're talking about racial microaggressions in communities, especially dealing with HOAs and neighborhood interactions, especially if you're living in a mixed neighborhood or a predominantly white neighborhood. I encourage you to go back to the beginning and watch from the beginning because we talk about different aspects and elements.
Hold on. The last thing I want to put, I want to go out with this tune, which I don't have the rights to it. I want to listen to this for a second.
May there be peace and love and affection among all creation, O God.
All right.
Hold on. Just one 20 seconds.
And how did you
Peace and
respond?
love from a tall black guy. That's the name of the artist.
So Apostle wants to leave us with peace and love.
Peace and love. Amen.
And I want to leave us with light is the most daring opposition to darkness. So continue to go out and be light. Be the peace and be the love that God has called for you to be. But when it's necessary to get down to business and making sure people are not trying to ruin your life, make sure you take care of your business. Make sure you document what you need to document. Make sure you follow through.
Yes.
Because as we know in the legal aspect, if you don't write it down,
it didn't happen.
It didn't happen.
It didn't happen. That's right.
So
document.
Yes.
All right. Thank you guys. I hope you all have a great and wonderful night. Take care, everybody, and God bless.
Good night.
What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go and